So, Hondo, the first thing I want to say is I'm really honored to have you on the show. I mean, Las Vegas Raiders, I mean, one of the best sports writers out there. I get a chance to listen to your podcast regularly. I love it. And I really love what you do, man. I think you bring the stories of the game and the Las Vegas Raiders really straightforward to the fans. I mean, it's a great listen. It's good to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. One of the things that we do is 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even on the day that my brother died, Christmas, it doesn't matter. We do the podcast every day, 7 days a week. Um, because first of all, that is the NFL now, number one. But when you are a beat writer, I get asked all the time by, when I speak to kids who are in school or, colleges will have you come in and speak to journalism majors. How do you do a podcast? Like I literally just before this did my daily podcast. That's probably 50 minutes. And they're like, how can you do a podcast in the middle of June that's an hour and a half or 50 minutes? And when you are embedded with a team and you are a beat writer, if you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing this job. You're not doing it right if you can't. And so to me, that's just if you're going to be all in, you got to be all in. And I think that is, you have to bring people every day something that they don't have about their team. And a lot of people miss it. Howard, there were people, you're too young to remember this, but Howard Cosell, when I was growing up, was kind of the gold standard of television
Right?
announcers. And he would bring things to the table that other people didn't bring. And there were people who knew more stats, but they didn't have the relationships. I was talking to an NFL owner recently, and he and I were talking about AI and how it's changing journalism. And he goes, you know what? I don't understand. He goes, it's not changing it at all because AI can't pick up the phone and get me on the phone, Hondo. You can. He
Right?
goes, you have
Right?
my number. He goes, now, after you write it or share it, AI may take it and disseminate it, but everyone's going to know you got it first. And that's what I tell everybody. I think AI makes it eliminates the weak, makes the middle guy have to decide, okay, am I going to put the effort in to be better or am I going to back away? But the elite are going to stay elite just simply because they know how to evolve. I mean, when I first started,
Right?
you wrote an article on a typewriter. Then, I remember going to a word processor and then you would
Right?
write your notes and then, go back and write it on your desktop. And then it was, oh my gosh, there's a laptop. And then now it's you're doing podcasting and radio and television and all of it. You either evolve or you die. And I think that is what being an NFL beat writer is my job every day is to take the Raider Nation where they can't go. They can't pick up a phone and call I mean, I was literally just moments ago on a phone with an NFL coach, and they can't go there. They can't grab a phone and text a player. They can't do that
Right?
stuff. So that's my job to take them there. And those guys that don't won't last in this business, and those guys that do will be able to stay a long, long time. And luckily, I've been able to do that.
And you really have to, when I listen to your show, I hear the insight, but you also hear, the ability that you have, to grasp the audience and really get them behind the scenes and what this team is about, now and in the past. And I was listening to the show the other day, and the Tyler Linderbaum signing, which I thought was definitely the best free agent signing this offseason. Things like that you bring to the table. I mean, people don't, they know it on the surface, but to hear that deep in that signing and what you bring to the table, I think it's an excellent job, and I really do.
I'll give you a couple of examples of that because you're young and getting into this field, but I'll give you two quick examples. So last year in December, I did a podcast on top Raiders for free agents for next year. Now I had already said that Pete Carroll was done. So I
Right.
already knew they were moving on. The season wasn't over. He hadn't been fired yet, but I already had reported that. And I said Tyler Linderbaum was the number one choice. And I talked about this is a generational talent, but where the Ravens are, I was hearing from inside the organization they were probably going to let him go. And
Right.
there were media people laughing at me, named me in my reports, and said this guy's on drugs, telling the Raider fans Baltimore's not letting him go anywhere. Well, I was hearing from people, and some of these were national, some were Baltimore, some were Raiders. Well, clearly,
Right.
all three of them, including the Baltimore guys, weren't talking to people in the building because they did let him go. And he was the Raiders' first choice. I was the one that said the Raiders were going to have to reset the market, and that Raider Nation was going to make him the highest paid interior offensive lineman if that's what it took. And all of that happened that way. I'll give you another one. This time last year, now it's a no-brainer now, but this time last year, I was reporting that the Raiders were all over Fernando Mendoza. Now,
Right.
he had just transferred from California. Nobody even had him being looked at as a first round guy. And I'm telling them, okay. And so I don't say that to pat me because it's not because I'm smart. It's because I've built relationships with the people who are, and so they feel, okay, we can share this with him. And, I didn't get that at first from the Raiders. I got it from people in other places. Then when I started sharing it, people from the Raiders, all right, where'd you get it? I'm not going to tell you, but they're like, all right, good job.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and so I mean, it's longevity. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give you all the time you need on the Raiders, but I'll give you one other
Absolutely.
quick story. A couple of years ago, the Raiders were going into the final preseason game of the year, and I had tweeted. I said Raider, and it's still on my tweets somewhere, and I've got tens of thousands of them, so you have to go look. But it
Right.
was the last year that Davante Adams was with the Raiders, so you can go back and look in that time frame. For some reason, I think they were playing Dallas, but I don't remember because that's an insignificant detail. I'm just looking in case your audience wants dates.
Sure.
But I put a tweet out that said tonight is going to have a huge impact on the future of the Raiders. Please bookmark this tweet because I'm going to come back to it at the end of the year and I will address it. And I had some of my, and I use this term loosely, competition, they're really not, mock me for it. Oh, he's talking about the third string quarterback, Aiden O'Connell. Had nothing to do with him. Had everything to do with Davante Adams. And at the end of I kept reminding people throughout the year, I would just
Right.
retweet that tweet just to remind people I told you all this. Well, I knew going into that night that players, if Antonio Pierce did not make Davante Adams play that night, that he was going to lose the locker. And his first year as a head coach was going to be over.
Right.
And I knew that. So this is where a young journalist or even older ones who don't operate in, I don't know that I would be as strong as say integrity, but for me, it's an integrity issue. If I had reported that night, if Davante Adams doesn't play tonight, Antonio Pierce is going to lose the locker room, it would have created a fire because my voice is loud enough to create that.
Right.
And it would have been a media member created storm. I knew that nobody else had what I had because I know who told me. And
Right.
so it didn't matter if I waited to the end of the year because nobody else was going to have it. And at the end of the year, when I told everybody, here's what happened, this is why that was so big. And oh, by the way, he did lose the locker room and he ended up getting fired. Just like
Right.
last year with um, Pete Carroll. I mean, I kept after I think it was week 6, it may have been week 8. I reported Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, is not going to come back. I'll tell you more about it at the end of the year. Now, throughout the year. He's getting all this criticism. I'm defending him. This isn't his fault, yada, yada, yada. When the year's
Right.
over, I told the fans, did you know only 6 halves of 2025 did Patrick Graham basically tell everyone, go screw yourself. I'm going to run my own defense. And he only gave up 9 points. That's not on Patrick Graham. That's on Pete Carroll. And so
Right.
you also have to understand it's not my job to interject myself into the story. And in both of those cases, I would. But it is my job to tell the story. And so I think it's being wise enough, having gray hair to know when do I have to tell it and when do I mean, I owe it to my employer. If somebody else can get this and run it, then I got to run it.
Right.
But if I know nobody else is going to get it, then I can sit on it and I don't interject myself into the story. Just that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's it. And you talk about professional journalism too, and everything that that revolves around this, and really any business is relationships, building those strong relationships, and the strength in that is, and you can tell that that comes across with you, and I think that's why the podcast does so well, and you have so many followers because it's great to hear, a media guy that shoots straight, not only behind the scenes, but the reputation is there already. And that's why the show's such a great listen. And that's why, even though I am a Steeler fan, but I've been a closet Raider fan for a long time. I mean, really, who wouldn't be? The mystique of this organization, and watching Al Davis and John Madden and all those guys when I was a kid, and seeing like Kenny Stabler coming up, and Dave Casper and all those guys. I mean, it's just it's great to follow an organization, and like I said, and listen to a show, with a guy that really brings it and has that reputation. I really appreciate that, what you do, honestly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely do. We were talking, we talked about Tyler Linderbaum, but I want to get into the off season. We talked about, Pete Carroll, obviously, and, Klint Kubiak coming in from Seattle, obviously coming off a Super Bowl. And what I liked about this is I looked at it last year, and the Raiders did have and are continuing to build. They got a lot of good, solid pieces, though. I think especially offensively. What is your take on the 2026 season with Klint coming in and that transition?
Well, first of all, I've been doing this for decades, and I have never seen an NFL team transform in one off season the way the Raiders have this year. And I'm not a Raider fan. Um, I'm not. I tell the fans that on my
Right.
podcast. I'm not ashamed of it. But I think that I'll give you a quick example. I think one of the things that's hurting our country is if you're a person to the right, you run to Fox News. If you're a person to the left, you run to MSNBC or you run to CNN.
Right.
I don't need to hear from people who agree with me. I'm not stupid. Just give me the factual information and I can ascertain my own opinion. Um, I think sometimes fans want to go hear people that are going to tell them what they want to hear. I'm not going to name the journalist, but years ago I was in a press box at a baseball game, Major League Baseball game, and there's award-winning journalist. If I named him, you would know him, and all of your audience would too. He's that famous.
Right.
Who turned around and he said, "All right, boys, give me something so outlandishly stupid for a column that everyone will click because they're dumb enough to read it." And somebody threw something out and he goes, "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." He goes, "That'll get a lot of views." And he wrote it.
Right.
He wrote it. And the next day, it was the topic all over sports radio. It was the topic all over the country, everything. And I knew he didn't believe it. He just wanted to get people engaged. That's TMZ, that's shock jock. That's fine if you're not portraying that you're a journalist. If
Right.
you are a journalist, then if you're covering the White House you're going to ask Trump the same questions you'd ask Biden or Obama or Bush or Reagan or anyone else.
Exactly.
And as a journalist, I'm not a fan, but I'm also not a hater. So let me explain what I mean when I say it's been the best offseason I've ever seen. For the last over 2 decades, if the Raiders had been arrested for being a quality NFL franchise, there would not have been enough evidence to convict them. And 2025 was a complete, utter dysfunctional mess. It was, and now remember, I covered the Detroit Lions, their 0-16 season.
Right.
I was the one who told Matt Millen. I called Matt Millen the day he was getting fired and told him, and he didn't know. And Matt's a dear friend of mine. I
Wow.
love Matt, but
Great player.
I mean, great, yeah, and an absolutely underrated general manager. I have so many stories that he has asked me not to tell until he's gone. And thank God he's not gone. We almost lost him, a few years ago, and he had a heart transplant. But he's one of my dearest friends on planet Earth. I love Matt.
Right.
And when people find out what he did to hold the Lions together, his reputation is going to change significantly. But that's not Matt. He isn't looking for the glory. So he just said to me, just don't do it till I'm no longer alive.
Right.
And anyways, but so the Raiders were so dysfunctional last year. It was a complete mess. And so they made the decision when it was just collapsing with Pete Carroll. We've got to fix this. We got to go back, wipe everything. And all of a sudden they decided we're going to take a disciplined order. They sat down. What do we want to be? And so when I broke the story that Pete Carroll was fired, the top of their list was Klint Kubiak. Now, because of Klint's run with the Seahawks, they couldn't hire him right away. So they met with him right away. He was able for an interview, and the interview was even better than they thought it was going to be. He absolutely hit it out of the park. So they're like, okay, we can't hire him till the Seahawks lose. So we're going to go interview everybody. So they went out and interviewed a ton of people. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but Evero, the great defensive coordinator, a young guy who's a rising star. They loved him, but they wanted to go with an offensive guy, and he's a defensive guy. So they're like, yeah, we really like him, but we're probably going to be picking a rookie quarterback, and he's a defensive guy. And the problem with that is if we bring him in, talking about Evero, and we go hire a great offensive coordinator and he develops Fernando, then next year someone's going to hire him to be their head coach to pick whoever's in next year's rookie class. So they didn't want to go that direction. And Evero didn't hit all the boxes like Klint did. They interviewed defensive guys, even though they thought, you know what, we want to go in an offensive route, but we're going to keep our eyes wide open. What if somebody wows us? Right. And there were some good ones. Okay. There were false reports. Jesse Minter turns them down. Absolute lie. Not truthful. He was not offered the job. And I got that not only from the Raiders side, I got it from the Minter side. Wow. Okay. There were people that said they offered the job to I cannot believe the guy that just got fired with the Giants. The New York Giants
from Buffalo.
Coach Brian Daboll.
Daboll. Yep.
Okay, absolute lie. I got that from the Daboll side. I got it from the Raiders side. And so every time they interviewed people, they started putting them up there. And nobody reached Klint. Okay, so they had a second interview with Klint. Hit it out of the park. No deal's done. They can't hire him. So they had a pecking order of who they liked.
Right.
But Klint was always at number one, but they kept interviewing people Because what if Klint would have stayed in Seattle? What if he would have decided, I don't want to go to the Raiders? Whatever the circumstance was, they were
Right.
ready, but they didn't panic. They just said, no, that's our first choice. So we're going to wait for him. We're going to show discipline. Okay. They did their research. I mean, again, this time last year, I mentioned Fernando. And because they were way out ahead of the curve looking at, you know, who are the possibilities? They knew about the people before others did. They set their draft board. They knew what they were looking for in the draft. I can tell you this, every single pick in their draft, we wrote about because they were already hot on their tail. Trey Zune, we wrote about him during the season that the Raiders loved him. And they ended up with him and had him in multiple of our mocks. So they just
Right.
stayed disciplined. Now, this franchise has never stayed disciplined for this amount of time in the 7 years I've covered them. And it's been 7 months of discipline. Now, that's not a lot. It's not a lot.
That's right.
They could, I was joking. I've known Kirk Cousins for 23 years, and I was joking that, the first interception Kirk throws, Raider Nation's going to want Fernando, but
For
Fernando's not
sure.
ready. Okay, so does the organization panic because that's what the fans want? No, they're going to stay. I think they're going to stay disciplined and stick with Kirk till
Agree.
Fernando's ready. If they stop being disciplined, then they're back to being the old Raiders. But after 7 months, I can tell you they have been extremely disciplined. They didn't go sign a bunch of, there were people, oh, they need Ayuk. Well, Brandon Ayuk. Well, how's that look? Or go get George. No. They wanted guys under
Right.
30. 2026 is a rebuild year. Now, I have said the more wins they have this year, the worse year it is. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. They're going to play a ton of young players. But next year, there's going to be more quarterbacks taken probably than in the history of any first round in NFL history. And the better the Raiders draft pick, they're not going to need a quarterback. So they're going to be able to trade it for a haul to help rebuild this franchise. And now they have 2 back-to-back draft classes with proven, actually 3, with proven drafting, stacking classes. So I hope they stick with young players. And because the worse their record is, the better they're going to be. So they can trade that draft pick and accumulate talent to a team that needs a quarterback because they're not going to need one with Fernando. So 26 is a rebuilding year. 27 is a rebuilding year. And then their anticipation is going into 28, they're going to be in the playoffs every single year. That is the expectation.
I could definitely see that too. That's great to hear that, the background on that too, that the way they think, because you could see the team, just from a fan's perspective, growing forward. Here's a piece here, here's a piece here. Obviously, with Genty and Brock Bowers, I mean, I think Brock's the premier tight end in the NFL.
Yeah, let me tell you the Brock Bowers story. You're going to love this story. So the Raiders did tens of thousands of mock drafts. Now, I broke this story, and later Tom Telesco, the general manager, confirmed it because people didn't believe my reporting. And in not one mock draft did they have Brock Bowers falling to them at 13. Now, there is a term in the NFL used by most NFL people called a dude. A dude in the NFL draft is a guy that you say you can't miss. He's a can't miss.
Right.
A lot of drafts have no dudes. This last draft, there was not one dude. Not one. Okay? A lot of really good players. Fernando, one of them, but there were no dudes. But in his draft class, Brock Bowers' class, there were 3 dudes. Talise Fuaga, Joe Alt, and Brock Bowers. Okay, now the Raiders had Joe Alt as the number 1 player, and all 3 of them as dudes. They would have taken any of the three and been thrilled. They had Joe Alt 1A, Brock Bowers 1B, and then Fuaga 1C. That's the way they had them ranked. They did not have Brock Bowers on the board in any of their mock drafts, making it to them at 13. In fairness, they had Joe Alt at none of them either. They had him, a guy maybe they move up for, but
Right.
they did not think Brock Bowers, and not one mock draft, not one. So as they're sitting there, I texted someone in the building at 6. I think it was 6. I may be wrong because it was a few years ago, so bear with me. But there was a spot where
Sure.
they were pretty certain Brock was going to go, and he didn't. And all I texted was, uh-oh. And they texted back an expletive.
Right.
And then with each pick, and so they got somewhere around 8 or 9. And I texted, Christmas is coming, ? And it's dropping. Now, at this point, they're getting tons of phone calls, and then bam, they're on the clock. And they're getting tons of phone calls. The Rams were trying to get ahead of them. The Rams called, and Tom Telesco, who should be a general manager in the NFL right now, it is a joke that Tom Telesco is not a general manager,
Right.
is sitting there, and people are wanting to trade for 13 to get Brock. Okay. But they were smart. Telesco's like, I'm not trading the 13th pick. Throw the draft chart out because I got the number 1 overall player of value on this board. So if you want it, you're going to have to give me number 1 player overall value. See, that's what good teams do. They
Right.
don't look at, okay, well, I'm at 13, so pay me what it costs. No, I'm sitting at 13 with the number 1 player on the board. You're going to pay me like the number 1 player on the board is available. And then the bad teams are like, well, I can't justify that to my fan base. Well, then you don't believe in this guy. We do. And they stayed
Right.
firm and picked Brock. He is a unicorn. He is already the best tight end in the NFL. I think you can go ahead and size him for his Hall of Fame jacket if he stays healthy. And I'm going to tell you, as a guy that knows him well, he is the best tight end in the NFL, the best upside in the NFL, and maybe the best person at any position in the NFL. What a peach of a human being. Okay. And that's where you get smart. That's where you are smart. You understand it's what am I giving away? I'll give you another example. The Bears go pick Mitch Trubisky. Okay. And I said at the time, if he pans out to be a star quarterback, was the best of all time. If he doesn't, you're not going to be employed. What the value is in what is somebody willing to pay. And if somebody would have traded up to number 1 overall or number 13 overall and picked Tom Brady in the first round, every talking head would have said it was a stupid pick. And if his career would have went the exact same way, all of them. What I challenge your listeners to do, if you want to be an informed fan, hold the people you listen to accountable. Hold them accountable. And so I say all the time, who am I to judge a draft pick when a general manager or coach pick them? I'm going to judge them after 5 years. And that's where we'll know. So I'll give you another one. In the NFL, it is accepted that you hope your 6th and 7th round guys make your practice squad. So if your team picks a sixth or seventh round guy who makes the roster, that's already a good pick.
That's right.
It's already a good pick. It's already a good pick. It's not the player's fault of where they get picked. It's the general manager's fault. And so you'll see fans that will get all over a kid because they're mad at what he got paid. Well, it's not his fault where he got picked. It's not his fault at all. So what I would
Right.
go back and say to you is that, you know, fans need to start holding journalists accountable. One of the things that I do is I put all of my predictions out there. I'm not sitting in my mom's basement with my girlfriend whose last name is .jpeg. I'm not anonymously I'm not anonymously posting on message boards. My name's on everything that I do. I stand by it. I own it, not ashamed of it, and hold people accountable. And so I do that. And when guys like, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, the Raiders took a kid out of New Hampshire, a running back by the name of Dylan Labe, who made the roster, made it again
Right.
last year when members of the coaching staff last year, I asked them at this time of the year about him, and they go, "Who's he?" Didn't know his name.
That's amazing.
And shined this offseason, and he's going to make the Raiders third year in a row, 6th-round pick.
Right.
Okay. This is a great pick. And my point to you is I challenge your listeners is hold the people you listen to. Because there's a lot of guys like this guy I told you about, very famous for that column that I know he didn't believe, and who wrote it, but people, the loudest voice isn't the best voice. And
That's
hold
right.
people. Like I said, when I started covering the Raiders, there were people who had been extremely critical of Colton Miller when he was drafted out of Clemson. Well, he's a top 5 left tackle in the NFL.
Right.
And I said, go back and read all the people who, when they picked him, said it was a bad pick. I think there were many people that gave it a D and an F.
Right.
Then a lot of people said the same thing after year one. Just hold them accountable. I don't have a problem with organizations being held accountable. I have no problem with me being held accountable. And fans should do that of their media. They should do that of, again, I don't have a problem with a hot take. I have a problem with a hot take that's wrong and nobody holds them accountable.
Right. Right. They should be. They should be out. And that's why I like it, like you said, the straightforward, taking ownership of of what you talk about. And it really comes across. Everybody that's listening, Las Vegas Raiders Insider on YouTube, Hondo Carpenter. Listen, a daily podcast. And it's a great listen, for Raider fans, but for NFL fans too. I mean, if there's fans, obviously we have fans that listen in, from all across the NFL. But to be able to hear this kind of reporting and to be able to hear the backstory and what you do on a daily basis, it's very much appreciated for us as fans. I
Can I?
highly recommend the show.
Thank you for that. Do I have time to give you a quick insight here? Do I have time
For
to give a
sure.
second?
For sure. Oh yeah.
So today on today's podcast, we talk about quarterbacks from all over the NFL, and I want to go back. So Jaden Daniels was coming out in the draft, and I have done this so long that I know what guys are good drafters at what positions. Guys who are good at drafting quarterbacks doesn't necessarily mean they're good at picking defensive tackles.
Right.
And Jaden Daniels is a wonderful kid. Wonderful. He is a great human being. He is a tough as nails quarterback.
Right.
Okay. And every top quarterback evaluator said to me, I would not pick Jaden Daniels. And I said to them, can you tell me why? And all of them said, super talented, great player. but he plays fearlessly. And with his body size, he is going to get crushed by a 6'4", 265-pound linebacker that runs a 4.4 because Jaden does not know how to slide. He won't slide. He's going to dive shoulder first, going for 1 extra yard, and they said he's going to get hurt. Now, I want to make it clear. You heard me say this earlier in your podcast. I don't judge a guy till after 5 years. Um, that's to me where you draft, or I mean, how you judge a draft. And so after year one, I went on several national shows where people mocked me for saying they wouldn't pick Jaden Daniels. And I said on every one of them, I'm on here because I don't mind being held accountable to what I said. Bring me back after 5 years. I was simply reporting what the best drafters told me they thought. None of those shows are having me back on to mock me after last year when Jaden got injured. I'm rooting for the kid. But this is where the top drafters are like, I'm not picking him in the first round. Let me give you this statistic. 60% of first round quarterbacks fail. They fail.
Right.
So you have to mitigate your risk. And so the best quarterback evaluators only take the guys in the first round where you have mitigated every risk possible. Okay. So every one of those guys were like, I'm taking Jaden in the second round. I'm not taking him in the first because good teams can't waste first round picks. You can't waste it. So if you're sitting there and you're a team that says, there is nobody in the first round at pick 25 where I'm sitting that's worthy of that pick because I can't miss in the first round, I'm trading out. And everyone's like, oh, man, they traded out. Okay, it's because those teams don't take risks. Now, are you going to miss on some guys? You are.
Right.
But for everyone you miss, you save your rear on 9. You know, you're going to love this story.
Right.
You're going to love this story. Last year, when, Steeler fan was all over Mike Tomlin. And I'm at the NFL owners meetings, and I have a great relationship with Tomlin. I love Tomlin. And I had an NFL owner say something to me. Now, let me just say, in my opinion, it's not even close. The best Steelers beat writer is Noah Strackbein who covers them for the Pittsburgh Steelers on SI. He is the gold standard. And he had an article where an NFL executive said, the question is not how many times has Tomlin got in the playoffs and lost in one game. It's how many teams has he gotten to the playoffs where the Steelers didn't give him the talent.
That's right.
That's the whole issue. Yeah, with Mike. But see, Steeler fan doesn't want to think that way. It's all Mike's fault, which is fine. That's the nature of fans. That's why they're called. It's short for fanatics. But listening to NFL owners talk about Mike, he could have had a ton of jobs this year. Didn't want one. That's his choice. But last year, listening to people, oh, is Aaron Rodgers coming back? Noah reported the entire time. Not that he's coming. Never wavered on it. And all these other people are out here getting Steeler fans worked up. This year, Aaron Rodgers is holding out. I just read Noah. No, he's not. He's coming.
Right.
And everyone else, see the hype. Let's get clicks, or let's just give the boring, truthful reporting. Well, again, hold your media accountable. Just hold your media accountable. And so, like with Jaden Daniels, great player. You can take a risk on him in the second round, but it's too big of a risk in the first round that he's going to get the injuries. And so it's those type of things. In that same draft was a guy named Drake May. Okay?
Right.
One of the best quarterback evaluators who gets paid a lot of money to evaluate quarterbacks for NFL team is a guy named Drew Stanton, played in the NFL for 15 years.
Right.
Drew comes on my podcast, who has a proven track record of picking the best quarterbacks. Teams pay him for his information. That's how good he is.
For sure.
He said, I think the best quarterback in this draft is Drake May. And people are like, what? Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. I think he's the best. For this reason. It doesn't mean I think the others are bad. Well, there are a lot of people today that would like to have Drake May.
For sure.
And so my point to you is fans should hold their team accountable. Fans should hold their coach accountable. But fans should also expect from themselves that the people they're listening to have a brain. You know, if you listen to an idiot, if you walk into a Jenny Craig clinic and your teacher looks like Jabba the Hutt, you're the idiot.
That's right.
You're the idiot. And so, you know, if you go to a Chinese restaurant and order a French dinner and you don't like it because it tastes like Chinese food, you're the idiot. And so
that's right.
I think fans need to start demanding more and say, okay, you told me this, and this is not what happened. Okay, why? Why? You know, was there a reason? What, you know, a guy was in a car wreck. He got his hip knocked out of joint. Not his fault. But my point to you that I'm trying to succinctly make is that, you know, when you look at what the Raiders have done, it's been smart. So we go to Fernando. I interviewed a ton of NFL executives who've been in the league a long time about where they would rank Fernando in the last in the 25, 24, 23 class in 26. And I said to him, and I don't remember how many quarterbacks there were. Let's just say there were 15 first-round quarterbacks taken when you include Fernando. This was before the draft. And I said, and I'm only making that figure up. I don't think it was 15. I think there was 12, but whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. I said, based on where they were coming out of college, where do you have these 12 men ranked? And only 3 of those men said that Fernando was the best quarterback in the last 4 years. But when you aggregated their score of where they ranked him, Fernando was the highest rated quarterback. Okay. Only 3 had him the best. But when you aggregated where they ranked him, he was the best. Now, follow me for a moment.
Sure.
I shared all this with Raider Nation back in, I think it was March. May have been February, but I think it was March. And I said at the time, 60% of first-round quarterbacks automatically fail. I think the number is like 85 or 88% of first-time head coaches fail. It's astronomical first-time coordinators numbers fail. It's close to 90. The Raiders have 2 first-time coordinators, a first-time head coach, and a first-round rookie quarterback. The odds are against the Raiders for this working.
Right.
But in each case, they mitigated risk by how they did it. And so I told the Raider Nation this. I'm not going to even remotely be critical of the Raiders in 26 and 27 unless they do something stupid. I think the worse the record, the better it is for the Raiders. If they go out and sign a 33-year-old veteran to a ton of money, I'm going to ask why, if you're in the middle of rebuilding, when you could be getting young guys reps.
That's right.
But I had said, if Fernando fails, and the odds are he's going to, the way the Raiders approach this, when you've got the best executives calling him the best quarterback prospect in the last 4 drafts, if he fails, I'm not blaming the Raiders. They made a smart pick.
For sure.
They needed a franchise guy. They go get the best one in 4 years. And if he fails, It's the odds that failed. It's not going to be the Raiders. Now, if they do something stupid like rush him or go surround him with injured veterans, then I would be critical. But if they stay on the course that they are and this fails, my point is, hey, this is why it's called, you have to play it out. It's not called winning, it's called playing. Same principle. I'm an avid hunter.
That's right.
And I remember the first time I took my daughter hunting with me. And we got done and we had gone on a 3-day bear hunt and we didn't see a bear. And she said to me, she goes, Daddy, we didn't shoot anything. I said, well, honey, it's called hunting, not shooting. And
That's
she
right.
she didn't like that concept. And but my point to you is that if they have done this right and if they stay on the discipline pattern, it's probably going to fail statistically. But even if it does, I'm going to say it was the right decision because of how they've done it.
Yeah, just listening to, the story of you saying how they put it together, the discipline, and how they continue to gradually go here, here, and here. I like the fact that the team is going to, go that younger route and build. I mean, they're looking long term and not short term, which is excellent. They know where they're at right now. They understand, the personnel that they have, and then you have a coach like Klint that I think is going to do very well. Obviously with Kurt starting, I think that's the best route for them to go right now. Kind of bring Fernando up, slowly, gradually, and not dump him in like you said, to fill those growing pains immediately. I think they're in a position now to where they can extend this long term and build gradually, just like you said. I think that's exactly the route that they should go, and that's the route I saw them going to, and it's a good take on it. It's a really good take on it. The one thing I wanted to ask you in closing here, I know we got we're an hour under already, man. I love talking to you. It's really good to hear the stories and all the background here. Maxx Crosby, obviously that was the hot take. Goes to the Ravens. Physical issue, and I mean the guy is not just one of the premier
Hang on, hang
players.
on, hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. That's not accurate.
Okay,
Okay,
that's what I wanted to hear.
okay, let's just stop right there.
I thought
Um,
so too.
okay, the Ravens had all the medical information. Everybody knows the medical information. There was nothing new. That was
Right.
them getting cold feet. And I'm going to tell you, around the NFL, there was a lot of people that felt like the Ravens overpaid for Max, but multiple executives, including ownership teams, told me that was classless. That was them getting cold feet. Um, I'm going to tell you this. I think Jesse Minter has an opportunity to be a great head coach in this league. I feel terrible for him that he took the Raven job. I do not think that's a good job. I think first of all, Ozzie Newsome and all that he did deserves so much credit. Then obviously he's not there anymore, but John
I
Harbaugh
agree.
kind of held that together. I'm not going to report some things right now, but there's things internally that I know. That organization, after losing Ozzie and losing, uh, you know, Harbaugh, Johnny, and I have so much respect for the Harbaugh family, love them. Uh, I feel bad for Jesse that he went there. And I don't think it is a well run organization at all. And I'm going to tell you, I had at the NFL owners meeting, I had one very high ranking NFL executive said to me, I'm, I wouldn't want to do business with Baltimore unless he goes, that was classless. He goes, they way overpaid. And he
Right.
goes, because they panicked needing somebody. He goes, and then they probably realized they panicked. He goes, but it's your word. He goes, everybody knew where Crosby was.
That's
And
right.
I'm going to say something to you. I want to be careful because I don't want to give away who I was talking to, but a very respected NFL person said to me, that deal would have never happened with Ozzie or John, but it also wouldn't have been backed out on either
For sure.
because
For sure.
those were the kind of guys when you made a deal, you made a deal. And now the Ravens are going to come calling on somebody and it's going to be a deal that can't be consummated immediately like draft night. And there's going to be people that don't want to deal with them or they're going to have to overpay. There is tons of interest in Maxx Crosby. Everyone knows where he's at. I had one very famous
Right.
NFL head coach tell me to my face, I'd take Maxx Crosby right now. He goes, everybody knew where he was at. Of course, when the deal went down, his knee wasn't ready. Everyone knew it wasn't. But that guy's
Right.
going to be ready, and he's an elite player. So that's a bunch
For
of
sure.
crap. Do I think that they overpaid? Yes. And when the trade was announced, I said, bad move by Maxx. I wouldn't want to go to Baltimore, not knowing what I know, especially
Right.
now that Johnny's not there. And I love Jesse. That's not a Jesse slam. Don't take that as a Jesse slam. I feel bad for Jesse because I think that guy could be a great head coach in the NFL in a bad spot.
Right.
Someday when all is said and done, you invite me back on your show if you're still doing this in a couple of years when
For
Lamar
sure.
is no longer playing and you play that clip and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying to you that that was a bunch of crap. It was smoke and mirrors, and it made a mockery of the NFL. And
Agree.
that one's going to come back to haunt the Ravens.
I think so too. And looking at them, you talk about that, John Harbaugh leaving, and like you said, he held it together. But we're starting to see, you started to see the cracks in the middle of last season, even before that. Being a Steeler fan, I get to watch them, regularly. You know the ins and outs of the teams a little bit from a fan side. You get to see them a little bit more. But you're exactly right. I mean, Maxx, when I look at him, this guy is to say that he's just a talent is small. I mean, the motor that he has. I mean, you watch that and you watch this organization play, and every single play, he's nonstop. I mean, 1,000% giving it all. One of my favorite players in this league to watch on the defensive side of the ball, no doubt. So, in your take, Hondo, do you think he stays in Vegas?
That's too vague of a question. Um, that's too vague of a question. I think that there are
Tough one.
absolute scenarios where he could be traded. Yes, I think there are. I don't. That doesn't mean they're shopping him, and it doesn't mean he's demanding a trade. But I've known Maxx since his freshman year at Eastern Michigan University, when one of the assistant coaches on that staff said to me he was going to be an all-pro NFL player. Back before his body had a tattoo on it, when he was undersized at a small school, and that was essentially his only offer. And they told me he was going to be an NFL All-Pro. And that coach's name is Herb Haygood, that assistant coach. And I've known Maxx a long time. I consider Maxx my friend, not just a guy I cover. And I can tell you that Maxx Crosby is a unicorn. He practices the exact same way that he plays. He wins the sprints every day in practice. The sprints for the entire team. Not talking about the line.
It's amazing.
And remember, the Raiders now have multiple 4-3 guys.
Right.
And
Right.
Maxx wins the sprints every day. So I'm just going to tell you this. I have had the privilege in my career of covering some of the best to ever play the game. And they approach it different. They're different players. Maxx Crosby has hundreds of millions of dollars in business interests outside of football. He's not playing for the money. I mean, go look at his contract. He's not playing for the money.
Right.
he just wants championships. And with the Raiders in a rebuild, if he had a chance to go to a championship team and make the Raiders better, because he does love the Raiders. He loves them. His body's tatted with
See
Raider
that,
stuff all over it.
right?
If the trade benefited the Raiders and gave him a shot at a championship, I think both parties would have to ask themselves, is this beneficial for both?
Right.
But I want to make it clear. The Raiders don't hate him. They're not looking to get rid of him. They're not looking to give him away, and he's not looking to leave. But I absolutely can see a scenario in which he would go somewhere else. But in any way, I am not representing that it is an acrimonious relationship.
Right. Right. Well,
All right,
Hondo,
bud.
I want to say thank you for joining the show. Las Vegas Raiders Insider on YouTube. Hondo Carpenter, everybody that's listening, great show. I mean, good takes. I love the way you break things down. I love the truth, and that's great to hear that too from your side. And I want to wish you the best of luck. Honestly, Raiders Insider, and I know you have a big show coming up on there. You and your wife. I know you were talking about wearing a tuxedo was one thing I was laughing at that you said. That was a great take. Tell us about that, so the fans are able to listen in.
So we have never done a live show, and I'm going to be very blunt. I don't know how to do a live show.
It's tough.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how tough it is, but I've done a ton of live TV in my career, so that doesn't bother me. But we're doing a live show on Thursday, July 2nd, 6 a.m. 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And we're inviting Raider fans, NFL fans to just join, ask questions. And so I'm going to wear a tuxedo. My wife, who is much more beautiful, she's a gem. She's going to wear a Cinderella costume because I always call her my Cinderella. And we have 8 children. Our youngest biologically is graduating from Western Michigan this year as a senior. But our youngest, who God brought into our life, our little 3-year-old who turns 4 in a couple weeks, his name is Dexter Ernest Wayne Carpenter. And an
Nice.
NFL person has nicknamed him the Law Firm because of Dexter Ernest Wayne Carpenter. Come here, son. And but he may even make a cameo. Can you say hello to all the folks? Can you say
Hey,
hi?
buddy.
Hi.
All right.
Dexter,
And
how are you, buddy?
he may make an appearance, but yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to try it because a lot of fans have asked for it. I have no idea why, but they have, so we're going to try it and hope it works out.
I think it's going to be great. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. Everybody that's listening
All right, buddy.
again, Las Vegas Raiders Insider on YouTube. Hondo, I want to say thank you for joining the show, Glory Game Podcast, and best of luck this season. We'll be listening in. I'll be spreading the word too. And you have an open invite back to the show. I love talking to you. I love hearing the background and everything. And great to have you on. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, buddy.